So if Turkey does attack our Syrian opposition allies, how should Washington react? Let's bring in General Malcolm Frost. He's a retired U.S. Army Major General. General, so why is President Erdogan's military threats that he is going to launch an attack within the next couple of days so troubling?
Well, good afternoon, Eric. Thank you for letting me join you. First off, I'd like to set a little context. Right now, the United States has just under 1,000 forces there in northern Syria, and what they're doing is conducting joint security patrols, and they're on outposts with Turkey, U.S. and Turkish forces together, air and ground patrols, trying to secure that buffer zone. But from Turkey's perspective, what they see to the south is a security vacuum. As you just heard, you have Syrian defense forces, you have Kurdish forces, which they consider terrorists, and you even have Russian forces to the south. And so what you see is President Erdogan is saying that the U.S. Joint patrols and efforts are not moving fast enough and are not going far enough to provide them the necessary security that they want on their southern border.
Is he making this then a part of our fault and trying to encourage us to step up the security, or is this something else that he has in mind?
Well, it's important to note that the president has directed that we slowly withdraw forces in a phased withdrawal out of Syria. So I think he sees that as a potential for that security vacuum increasing. And so this, whether it's a bluff or bluster or he's really going to do this, is to be seen. But they have been making the preparations for a potential movement south. And what I would be concerned about, first off, is the U.S. forces, number one. And I think both the U.S. and Turkey have to be concerned if there is an attack or move into that buffer zone with Turkish forces to the south, there cannot be a death of a U.S. soldier. And we must have the chance to retrograde our forces out of the area if it comes to that.
And then what about what happens if do they coordinate at all, or they just say, here, we're going to attack?
Well, no doubt there are diplomatic actions happening, and there are military contingency plans occurring, and communications between the Turkish General Staff and the Pentagon, as well between Turkey and the U.S. State Department to ensure that that doesn't happen. But even as important, or just about as important, is the reaction of the Syrian Defense Forces. Do they stay and try and hold their ground? Do they retrograde? If they do, what happens to the thousands of ISIS prisoners in the prisons that they are guarding? We can't let that occur again and let them get free. So that's a second concern as well.
So what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think we're going to have a lot of furious activity right now in the State Department and the Pentagon to try and get through this diplomatically. There's probably contingency plans occurring right now to be able to reassure Turkey that they can execute those joint patrols in such a fashion to provide the buffer that Turkey desires. But at the same time, the U.S. is under a lot of pressure there in the Middle East. We have Afghan elections that are coming up. Forces are needed for that. You have the forces that were committed to Saudi Arabia and to UAE based on the attack, Iranian-backed attack of the Saudi Aramco facility. And you have new national security leadership here in the United States, a new national security advisor, a new Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, and a new chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Mark Milley. And they are trying to set forth a national security strategy and defense strategy for the future. So this is a big fly in the ointment when it comes to commitment of potential global forces for the United States to ensure that this conflict doesn't get worse, ISIS doesn't rear its head again, and that we keep this buffer between Turkey and Syria.
And talk about a fly in the ointment. I mean, what is Erdogan's up to? I mean, look, Turkey is supposedly a NATO ally. Isn't that really only a name? I mean, you know, they buy a Russian defense system. We canceled the sale of the F-35s. He does not act like a democratic, freedom-loving ally of the United States in many ways. What type of sanctions should we have against him? How does he change his behavior? Or is that even possible with a strong man like that? And why is he in NATO in the first place?
Well, NATO, Turkey as a NATO ally has been important for many decades. I think when you look at the strategic position of Turkey, when you look at the influence of Iran, you look at the influence of Russia, having Turkey as a NATO ally in that region is big. It's huge for the United States. It's huge for NATO. With respect to Erdogan, I think what he is doing is he's trying to leverage support for the United States for us to kind of commit some assets, commit and make some commitments to him in that region to ensure, quite frankly, that his south, the southern side of Turkey, is not insecure. Again, from a security perspective, from a national interest perspective, I can understand what President Erdogan is doing. However, it's a delicate balance, and I think he's looking at Iranian influence, Russian influence, and NATO, and he's trying to kind of play his cards based off of who kind of supports best. And right now, this is the pressure he's leveraging on the U.S. using that NATO card.
Yeah, we'll see what happens in the next few days. General Malcolm Frost, thank you for your insight today, and thank you, of course, for your service to our nation.